What's up, fantasy managers? My name's Tom, and I'm back talking about F1 Fantasy. This is my team selection video for IMOLA. We've got a week off, to be fair, since Miami, but we as fantasy managers don't get a week off. We don't even get a day off. It lives in our brain, just rent free, doesn't it? So we never stop thinking about it. It's just always there, lurking around the corner. And so yeah, I thought I'd just get my thoughts out kind of a bit earlier than usual. I normally wait for the actual race week, but I was like, seems to be the trend of my fellow YouTubers to just get stuff out there. So I think people are probably thirsty for some more content. So why not give you a nice drink of team selection? That is a terrible metaphor, but there we go. So yeah, we are race week 7. This is my team selection video. But before we get into the actual nitty gritty of what the hell is going on in F1 Fantasy, we do need to have a little section for those managers that suffered in Miami. And so it's been a few weeks now, but the Violin is out again. We've got 3 teams on screen. We've all got more or less the same team, not exactly, but give or take a point. We've got Ewan, fellow YouTuber, F1 Fantasy pole position. Didn't use his no negative. He says missed the deadline on a flight over to the United States. Big mistake, Ewan. You're not allowed to have a life as F1 Fantasy Manager. You've got to stay at home, do nothing but just stare at your team, at Twitter, and as soon as you do anything else, you go off flying an aeroplane and look what happens. So yeah, he says had no idea that the weather was chucking down, so no negative was activated. The DNF pain train took no prisoners. Similar, well, exactly the same team actually, isn't it? For Mr. F1 Fantasy, he said, I would like a song played for the DNF train. I jumped on, please, Tom. So here we go, Mr. F1 Fantasy, this is for you as well. And finally here, again, a similar sort of team. We've got Pedro here over on the far side. He says 3 DNFs and 1 null driver. And then just to round off the Violin session for this week, we've got a couple more. We've got Ruskowski. Now, I haven't got this on screen because there's no actual team screenshot. It's just a few words of sadness to share with you. He says, Russ says, use my limitless chip. Switched my 2 times to Verstappen after seeing the Leclerc crash. Verstappen proceeded to have one of the worst weekends he's ever had, ruined and otherwise fine, limitless. Yeah, Verstappen finishing on 12 points for the 2 times compared to Piastri on 58 points. And then the last one is from Kyrakat, that's how you pronounce it. He says, I activated the no negative, but it appears as I never did. So I don't know if that's just a little mistake with the clicking of the mouse or the tapping of the phone screen, but he thought that he'd activated no negative, hadn't, and not a good weekend if you didn't play the no negative or indeed the limitless. So there's your Violin for this week. So that's the Violin session out of the way. That we can move sadness and despair just to the side for a little bit, not for too long, because there'll be plenty more sadness and despair in our futures. That's just the life of a F1 Fantasy Manager. You just have to accept that pain is coming our way. But anyway, let's have a think about IMOLA. I've had a quick look at what's going on in terms of safety, overtakes, and also a quick look at the weather. Early forecast, this is 10 days out or whatever it is from the weekend. An early forecast from a couple of websites I've looked at does indicate quite a reasonable chance of rain, or at least showers. But, that's very usual for this sort of track. I mean, we are kind of used to seeing wet weather in this vicinity. It even got rained off, a couple of years ago now, with all the dreadful floods and everything. So no real surprise to see rain, but obviously we are still quite a way out. But just bear it in mind, as always, that there could be some rain, and that could affect what we're doing. But yeah, in terms of the actual track itself, it's one of those kind of driver favorite tracks, kind of an old school, nice, speedy, high speed kind of old circuit. I say high speed, it's not got a lot of high speed corners as such, but it does seem to just kind of flow nicely around. So it's quite a reasonably high downforce track, and one which where driver skill is kind of exemplified, if you will. In terms of safety, I'm actually kind of surprised when I looked up the safety car record round here, because it is a little bit of a bit of a tighter old school track, with some gravel traps and that sort of thing. But the safety car VSC has only come out 28% of the time in its history since safety car was brought out in the 90s. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure how long IMOLA's actually been on the track on the calendar for, but either way, it's been around for a while, and 28% is very low, very low. Number of DNFs in the last 3 years. Obviously, he didn't have any races a couple of years ago, but before that, just 1 DNF last season, and then 3 2 years prior to that. So yeah, in terms of safety, pretty decent. So maybe we'll see some of those B tier drivers finally like avoid DNFing. I don't know. We just seem to be in this cycle of B tier drivers catching a DNF. We wait a couple of races, we latch back onto them, DNF again. So it's just we've only had 6 races, but it does feel like a bit of a cycle is going on where these drivers just catching a lot of DNFs, and it's hard, really hard to just dodge DNFs in general. So yeah, and then final sort of point from the track kind of look at the moment is the overtakes. Really, really low down the overtakes, 23rd. This is not a good track for overtaking, which is why a lot of us had kind of eyed up using Limitless. I know a lot of people have already used Limitless, but there's plenty of us that still have the chip available, myself included. And again, if it wasn't for the kind of disastrous budget situation that I once again find myself in, I would be strongly considering Limitless this weekend, because we should get a reasonably good delta. It's not impossible to overtake, so if your drivers mess up in qualifying, your Limitless drivers that is mess up in qualifying, they can get positions gained and overtakes, and actually it kind of helps your Limitless, and they should still finish hopefully in the top 5. But unlike Monaco, where if that happens you're kind of stuck. But yeah, the fact that it's bad for overtakes means the B tier drivers are probably not going to score greatly again, so the budget building situation just continues to be difficult. So in fact, let's have a look. Let's move on to the budget building and the team selection for IMOLA. So before we even get into looking at my team, we've got to look at this page from the budget builder on F1 Fantasy Tools, because it's very important. I don't intend to spend ages and ages looking through this, because I'm sure most of you, if not all of you guys that are watching this video, are probably using the website, and also a bunch of other YouTubers are like using it and talking through it and that. But I'll give my thoughts on it anyway, because you're here and you want to know, I guess. So I'll try and keep it brief, but I struggle with brevity. Is that a word? I don't know. I struggle with keeping things brief, basically, as my rambling currently goes to show. But my point is that Piastri. Let's talk for it. Piastri, easy peasy, plus 0.3 gain. Norris, again, should be quite an easy 0.3 gain. Past that, it's rubbish for the A tiers. And Russell, I don't see him getting 34, and past that it's just going to be impossible. So most likely what we're going to see is a plus 0.1 gain. Even Antonelli is actually probably going to drop, I would say, unless he has an absolutely storming weekend. It's normally only like the top 2, maybe P3 with like a driver of the day or something can get above 27 points on average, but I think Antonelli's probably only going to get a drop even. Russell likely probably just get 0.1 rise. So that's a positive. This is pretty much the one positive as fantasy managers, that we can see these guys, Russells and Antonellis, who are at the lower end of the A tier category, dropping in price or stagnating by only going up 0.1. That means it makes it a bit easier for us to hopefully climb the ladder and get to them quicker, so they're not really going anywhere, and we're going to get loads of 0.6 rises with our B tier drivers. Oh wait, no, that's already come to a grinding halt as we look at our B tier drivers and see it's just almost impossible for any of them really to get that 0.6 rise. I mean, it's quite reasonable for several of them to get the 0.2 rise. Stroll obviously looking really good there for the 0.2 after a whopping score in Miami, and that will carry for the next couple of races. So I think Stroll is a decent option for at least avoiding budget loss, and he should quite easily get a 0.2 rise there. As long as he avoids DNFing, that 1 point's going to go off. He scores like 5 or 6 points, then it's going to get even easier the following race. That said, he is getting to the point where he's getting a bit expensive. He's about to go into 10 million plus range, and he is inevitably going to get DNF at some point as well. I feel like we put him on a team and he's going to get DNF, but we can't really pick our teams based on that assumption, but it's probably going to happen because it's Stroll. It's not going to go a whole season without DNF, and it's going to happen. But anyway, my point is that I think Stroll is a fine option for the time being, just because the other picks are just really not exciting. Hulkenberg, really kind of unexciting. I think he's actually probably going to struggle to get this 0.2 rise, to be honest, even though it looks great, like he's second in line for the rise. But can you really see him scoring 5 points on a low overtake track? Like, if he's going to qualify probably okay, and then just stay where he is or drop back probably. So yeah, I'm not convinced by Hulkenberg. Hadjar, I think he's okay as a hold. He's cheap enough in there. Again, I don't think he's very likely to get that 0.2 rise. He is capable because he is decent at qualifying and be able to hold position more than the Sauber is. I think Hajar's got a bit of a chance to get that 0.2, but again, I see him more likely to get a drop, to be honest. Albon is certainly interesting, certainly one on my radar. He's in great form. He only needs 6 points, and I think he's more than capable of that because Albon's, the Williams is clearly hugely improved. It's complete contrast to last season where Albon was just repeatedly DNFing basically. It was horrendous. He had a horrific fantasy season. This season is a completely different story so far, and I do think he is a great asset. He is obviously expensive. It makes it a bit difficult, but when we're plugging in, Hajars and Bortolettos and that around him, most of us can afford to bring Albon in this week. I do question whether he's going to actually be as good as he is or has been over previous tracks, because it's a bit tricky to work out where the Williams is strong, and we know for sure like they're good in the lower downforce kind of areas. So is somewhere like Imola and Monaco, where it's more high downforce, actually going to be a bit more detrimental to the Williams? It'd be very interesting to see how they cope over the next couple of races. I think it's probably not enough to put me off the likes of Albon, and I would also be interested in Sainz if he did, better than a 0 in Miami. But I think the Williams are reasonable options, to be honest, and I think particularly Albon is certainly on my radar. Again, probably not going to get a 0.6 rise, but might get a 0.2 and can probably easily get at least avoid a 0.6 drop at least, providing he doesn't catch a DNF. Past that, Ocon is he's expensive and he's never really going to get 13 points unless he pulls off a masterclass of qualifying in P19, P20, and then just like safety car bumps him up to P10 or whatever, and suddenly he gets a rise. But we can't rely on that, so I think Ocon and everyone else below this is not great. Obviously, Bortoletto is great, and perhaps Doohan is also great, but obviously we've got the whole Doohan situation with, I'm recording this, Tuesday evening, the week before race week, so already strong rumours about Doohan losing his seat. So is Colapinto going to come in and replace him? And if he does, what price does he come at? If Colapinto comes in at 4.5, it's, I wouldn't say a no-brainer, but I'd say it's very, very, very appealing to bring in Colapinto if he came in at that price, even if he's around like 5 million or so. I think I'd still be tempted to bring him in, just because he's kind of low enough to be kind of low risk. And if he's like 5 or 5.5 million or something, then he can still only drop like once or twice before he hits the bottom, so it's not too bad. It's real slim pickings just because people keep DNFing. And this is what's frustrating about this algorithm, because look at Gasly. I brought him in for Saudi Arabia, he DNF'd. Then because of the budget situation, kind of have to move him out. I obviously moved him out for Alonso, who then also just DNFs. And I know I had the no negative, so it doesn't impact me points-wise, but it does budget-wise. And now I'm stuck with Alonso, who's just got a minus 13. I could have just kept Gasly and also got a minus 0.6 kind of drop, but scored 18 points. It's like, it's this budget algorithm is painful in multiple ways, and this is one of the reasons where I felt it was necessary to get rid of Gasly, just like a lot of people are like, we got to get rid of Behrman, for example, this week because he's got that price drop, and yet you bring him in, you bring someone else in for them, they just randomly DNF or whatever. And then the guy you had to replace, in this instance, Gasly from Saudi Arabia, goes and scores a whopping 18 points. Like, it's, even though we know, or we thought that Gasly would score decently in Miami, maybe even 18 points was above what we expected. But still, like, it's painful, because if it wasn't for this price and algorithm, I would have just kind of left Gasly in there. And it's kind of a bit, it's kind of painful and frustrating to not get those points from Gasly because of the algorithm. And it does make me question how much we should be pulling our hair out over this budget situation. I do wonder, most of us are like 108, 109, 110 million, maybe. I don't know exactly what the average is for engaged managers, probably somewhere in that region. I'm on 108.8, which I think is probably actually maybe fractionally below the average. I think some people have got a bit more than me for whatever reason. But it does make me wonder, looking further down the season, at what point is this budget gaining actually going to help us? And I'm thinking, like, because it's so hard to gain budget at the moment, it's going to get further and further down the season before we can actually capitalize and have like a double premium driver on top of a double premium constructor build. And it might be like literally the final few races of the season where this budget building attempt actually bears any fruit. And part of me wonders just scrap it off, just scrap off trying to pull your hair out, trying to work out all the budget algorithm stuff, and just actually just go for who you think is going to score points. I mean, look at what would have happened if I just kept a Gasly 18-pointer instead of Alonso, who scored me 0 whatever it was with a no negative, or 2 I think it was, I can't remember. But yeah, obviously you only get one no negative a year, so yeah, it's just giving me some food for thought that maybe I don't want to worry about the budget building because the situation is so dire. Just kind of scrap it off and try and get some points. I don't know. It's really, I don't know. Maybe I'm being short-sighted, and actually, yeah, at some point it will bear fruit, and the extra budget is going to help. It's just so hard to build budget at the moment. The final thing I'll talk about, because I've spent absolutely ages talking about this, and the beginning of this segment, I was like, I'm going to keep this brief. I'm not going to talk too much, but here we are, about 6 hours later. Kick Sauber, have they got potential for our teams? So let's have a quick look. So, let's go around in a massive circle. So Kick Sauber to get that 0.6 rise, which is the only team other than Williams probably that's kind of realistically going to get it. They only need -2. Are they going to score -2? Yeah, as long as they didn't get disqualified like what happened in Bahrain to Hulkenberg. Admittedly, 0 points in Japan, but everywhere else they scored at least like points. In fact, even that 0, like I say, that 0 would actually be enough for a 0.6 rise because they're so cheap. So it is kind of interesting that you could go Kick Sauber and get that 0.6 rise, but is that really worth it over a 0.3 rise from Mercedes and a chunk more points? These guys are averaging like single digits down here, whereas Mercedes are on like 40, 50, 60 points every week. So is it worth it? I don't know, because obviously if you go Kick Sauber, you then probably bring in someone like a Norris. In fact, let's have a look. If we do a manual team, this is what we got at the moment. If we bring in Norris, Kick Sauber, get rid of some people, Hadjar, for example, Norris. So team like this, I don't know how much this costs, but let's just save it and see what it looks like. 109, so this is budget 109.4. It's worth 200 points with the Kick Sauber minimum price, like Doohan, Bortoletto, and then a bunch of hopeful price gainers. But like I say, even Stroll is like not that likely to gain much price. Like he's probably only going to get 0.2. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's feasible. I say it's feasible. Plus 1.7 is quite nice. You compare that to, if I just throw it back to my team one at the moment, I'm currently losing budget. But if we say we're going to transfer out Alonso, transfer out Behrman, those are likely, to get rid of. Bringing in someone like Albon and then like a Doohan or something, what are we looking at? Plus 0.9 and then an extra 20 points. So you're looking at an extra sort of 20 points. This is obviously just a weighted average sim. This is not like exact science or anything, just a rough guide. But so we're losing out on like 0.8 million if we stick to this kind of template team. I'm not sure 0.8 million is necessarily worth it. It's like 0.4 million per 10 points. Maybe it's worth it. I don't know. Maybe it's worth it. It's really hard. It's really hard to know. But the fact that it's actually like caused me some thought, and I think probably a lot of you have some thought as well. The fact that this build, let's just move it to my team. This build of like the Kick Sauber is actually not looking awful in the Sims. Give me some thought. For me personally, I can't afford Stroll because I think Stroll, is most likely to go up there. If you've got an extra 0.6 in the bank, to me, you can get Stroll in there, and maybe that's a better option. But you could also just completely play it safe, put Doohan in. I don't know, Doohan, maybe Colapinto. I don't know what price Colapinto will be if he comes in, if Doohan does in fact leave the sport. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that Doohan stays, or let's say that Colapinto comes in and he's the same price or very similar price. We just put Colapinto in anyway. And Colapinto would then either can't drop price, or he can only drop price a little bit or whatever. And then this kind of saves us a lot of budget. We can't lose budget with Sauber. We can't lose budget with Bortoletto. We likely can't drop budget with Doohan / Colapinto. Hadjar, I think he's probably on 7 points. He's probably going to drop at least a 0.2. But then you've just got like the Piastri, Norris, McLaren just hauling points week in, week out. Is it enough? 0.3, 0.3, so there's your 0.9, and then no one else does anything. Hadjar might be drops. Maybe you're looking at 0.7. It doesn't. I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm going to do it by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the fact that it's, there's some thought to be had there, I would say at least. I don't think it's worth the points differential, and like I say, the sims that we're looking at just a second ago aren't like super accurate or anything, just weighted sims or whatever. But yeah, I think personally I'd probably want to keep it safer, because I don't think that the budget upside is enough with the Kicksauber, but then the fact that you just can't lose budget with a bunch of those assets is really nice. When all assets are struggling to gain budget, if you can get a team where you can't lose budget, it does make me think like, but then is that just like a really negative way to play the game? I don't know. Maybe we just need to, like I say, 5 minutes ago I was talking about, let's just forget about the whole budget thing and just try and score points. So I'm really in, as you can probably tell, several minds about how to play this game at the moment. So I think I need to calm down a little bit and keep things patient and just play it by ear, because everyone's kind of in the same boat. Even the teams that are ranked like really high are in a similar sort of boat. I'd say most of the top ranked teams are just still sat on the Piastri, McLaren, Mercedes, and then some combination of this. Everyone's kind of sat on the same team, so it's about being patient. It could be a case of waiting for what happens in Spain, the whole new technical directive, and moving about our teams and jumping on a potential new template at that point, if McLaren suddenly fall off the face of a cliff or whatever. But for the time being, is going the Kicksauber route just trying to be too clever? Quite possibly. But will it save us some budget? Also quite possibly. I don't know. It's tough, because then you've also got Mercedes, who are near enough guaranteed, barring like a couple of DNFs or whatever, they're near enough guaranteed to go at 0.3 and get a chunk of points. So is Norris over a budget driver who's probably going to drop better than Mercedes over like a Kicksauber? So I don't know. I think I'm personally leaning towards Mercedes, McLaren, Piastri, and just kind of sticking with this, getting rid of like Alonso, getting rid of Behrman, just keeping it simple, not overthinking it like I have just overthought for the last, like I say, 20-30 minutes, however long this video's already been. Keeping it really simple. Probably going Albon, even though I'm not entirely sure he's going to have the same capabilities in Imola and Monaco, but I have quite a lot of faith in him at the moment, so we all know how that story ends. But yeah, and then past that, probably go Jack Durham, just because he can't drop price. But again, a bit up in the air, because it could be Colapinto. So if it's Colapinto, I'd probably put him in anyway, as long as I can afford him. If Colapinto comes in at like 7 million, then I'll have to rethink the whole thing. If he does come in at 7 million, you could argue Nico Hulkenberg is still fine. He's quite cheap and has an okay-ish chance of going to 0.2. But I do kind of like this. If you can afford, if you've got enough budget to maybe, I don't know, scrap off Hadjar, for example, and bring in Stroll, I mean, you need like 3 million more than what I've got. I think that's absolutely fine as well. Stroll with a potential 0.2 rise, Albon potential rise, people that can't drop. That's a really nice kind of budget building team, as well as scoring some good points for Albon, Stroll qualifying further back, that sort of thing. So I do like that, but I'm like 3 million short of that. I can't help but think that Australia is going to have long-term consequences, if not season-long consequences, for teams like myself. It's just, I don't know, the situation we find ourselves in, right now everyone's in this kind of template. Everyone's in the mould of McLaren, Mercedes, Piastri, and then the best of the bad bunch of B-tier drivers. At the beginning of the season, it was like much more variety. We had McLaren, Williams, and let me throw it back to my other teams. We had these. You see my Team 3 McLaren Williams build going on at the moment. My Team 2 started the season with McLaren Mercedes Russell, and then my Team 1 was like the Ferrari Mercedes Piastri build. So there's quite a lot of variety, and whoever sort of whoever avoided those DNFs is just kind of sitting pretty since then, and it's been a massive game of catch up ever since then. So yeah, the biggest differential at the moment is probably, aside from chip usage, which we can't use every week, we only have like 6 chips a week, and 6 chips a season. Sorry, we only have them 6 times a season, and therefore we can't use them as a differential every week. The biggest differential at the moment, sadly, is DNFs. That is the reality of the situation. If you can avoid DNFing, then you're winning in this game. Which also makes me think: is it more reason to just sit on these kind of people like Bortoletto, people like Doohan, who can't drop in value, and they have the same likelihood of DNFing as someone like Alonso, apparently, because Alonso, we thought he was safe now, and he goes and gets DNF, gets tagged by Liam Lawson. So yeah, it's impossible to predict these DNFs, and they are having big consequences on us going forward. So yeah, my kind of jumbled thoughts at the moment. Jumbled thoughts I've kind of spewed out in this video so far is lightly considering the whole Kicksauber build, but not really looking at it at the moment. But then again, I was sort of half considering no negative last week, and then was like also not really going down that route. And then suddenly, with an hour to go, it's like, oh my god, it's tipping down with rain. No negatives coming out the pocket. So, yeah, I'd say my summary of thoughts at the moment for team selection and IMOLA is probably just be patient, stick with the template. Not going to use any chips. Probably just going to get rid of Behrman, get rid of Alonso. Like I say, I think Albon is probably coming in. I think he's got some decent points potential as well as potential for budget gain, and then just kind of sit on these kind of rubbish rookies that kind of just don't do anything. That is kind of the state of the game at the moment. Like I say, I'm probably not going to go limitless. Again, I could go limitless because I think it is a good opportunity. If it wasn't for the budget situation, I think limitless is a great option this week for the whole Delta thing. And I could still go down that road if, because like I said, as you get the impression, I'm very split on this whole, how much do I care about budget, and is it worth just ignoring budget for a week, going limitless, getting the max out of it? Everyone else is struggling for budget anyway, so what are we really doing, shuffling our teams around? Like, yeah, we're kind of guaranteed a 0.6 drop with Alonso, Behrman, for example. But then if we move to someone like a Hulkenberg or whatever, like, are we really going to get much budget out of it? I don't know. How much do you want to protect budget? How much do you want to go for points? It's really tough balance at the moment. I'm getting a bit frustrated with the whole budget building at the moment. So I don't know if I'm just getting a bit impatient and should listen to my own advice and be more patient and just kind of go with a team like this. So this is kind of where my things are at the moment. I'm sorry, this entire video has just been one massive ramble. I apologize for it, but these are just my thoughts, I guess, because Miami's only just happened a couple of days ago, and it's still a long way out for Imola. Lots going on, lots of unknowns as well, the whole doing situation. Lots of unknowns because it's hard to project what's going to happen further down the season. Do we build budget? Do we score points? Do we keep the balance? Do we go limitless? Blah, 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 blah. So lots going on, and I hope you've been able to follow it. And I'll catch you again next week. I'm hoping to do a final thoughts video because lots going on last week. Didn't have time to do it. I'll hopefully do a final thoughts for you next Friday. I won't be able to do a deadline stream because those of you that don't know, I hope this doesn't make you dislike me anymore, but I am actually like a lifelong Crystal Palace fan, and for once we've actually got a chance of winning something, and it's the FA Cup final on Saturday of qualifying. So during the deadline I'm going to be up in London going to Wembley, so I won't be doing any deadline streams yet again, but I promise you I will be doing deadline streams again, because I know some people have like missed that, and I will get back round to it at some point, but it's just, yeah, busy, lots going on. So anyway, yeah, I'll catch you for some final thoughts anyway after we've had some practice sessions down the line. And this video is probably like the record length, so I'm going to stop talking and say goodbye.